Good morning on this kind of rainy Mother's Day, Flower Communion Sunday. Welcome all. Let me just say, if you haven't brought your flowers up to put in the display here, please feel free to come up and drop them in one of the vases. We'll have the flower exchange later in the service. There are plenty of flowers, so please, please feel free to, oh, we got some magnolias even coming. They're gorgeous. Okay. All right, well, welcome to the service. I'm Pam Schumann, and I'm a worship associate here at Horizon. We're very excited to have you, welcome you to our worship service this morning. We're glad to have you with us today, whether you're joining us in person or virtually, whether you've been here for the first time or whether you've been here for longer than you can remember. Here at Horizon, we welcome people of all faiths or no faith in particular. Whoever you are, wherever you are in your journey, you are welcome among us. If you will look in your order of service, you'll see there are some announcements. And the Board of Trustees Town Hall meeting is today after the service. If you have any questions, because next Sunday after service, we're having our annual congregational meeting. And there are other announcements in here that might be of interest to you, so please take a look at your convenience. Okay, now we will have our chalice lighting. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
Okay, we have a couple other things I want to share with you. The first one is we have Gail Williamson Cope here, who is one of our featured artists. Do you want to wave, Gail? Yeah. Gail has invested years creating her own style of paintings that would be identified in exhibits in New York, Chicago, Carrollton, and other areas inside and outside the U.S. Take the time to view her work for the details and hidden surprises, her vibrant colors, and the way she applies them. Her subjects delightfully cover our sanctuary walls. So Gail will be talking to us after the service if you want to visit with her. I'd also like to share our call to worship this morning comes from the writings of the Reverend Gretchen Haley. She writes, "Let us not go building new walls around our hearts. We have already enough that keeps us from each other, enough that keeps us from ourselves and the knowing of all that we have done, all that has been done to us and for us. The losses we sustained, the love we avoided, the life we held too tight. For this hour we practice showing up with a willingness to see, to be seen, to remember ourselves whole and still becoming better, to believe it is okay to not be okay, that we are loved even when we feel unlovable, that we belong even when the ground comes out from under us, to be for each other a surprising generosity, a sudden sweetness, a sign of hope, the start of a new day. Together, we can be this brave. Come, let us worship together."
And now we will have our chalice lighting. Our chalice lighting words today come from Reverend Susan Frederick Gray. As we light our chalice this morning, may we be mindful of how radical and powerful love is, and how dangerous those who use fear perceive love to be. May we know how necessary and essential it is to keep alive the message of universal love, of humanity and human dignity, of reverence for life, all creation, in our hearts and in our actions. We are now among the keepers of that flame. And if you will join me now in the affirmation of our church, it's in your order of service and projected. Love is the doctrine of our church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in harmony with the earth. Thus do we covenant together. And now, if you will stand as you are willing and able, we'll have our opening hymn, number 1001, Morning Has Come.
Now it's time for the children's story. If we can have the young and the young at heart, please come forward. And if you have brought any goodies for Metro Crest, please pass it to a young person that they can bring it up and put it in our basket over here to your left. Our story today is called Wanda's Roses. Now, we have no pictures for you, so you're going to have to use your imagination and imagine the roses in your head. One morning in spring, on the way to school, Wanda noticed a bush growing in an empty corner lot. It was surrounded by trash and piles of junk. It was bare and thorny and about 2 feet tall. And Wanda, who loved beautiful things, felt her heart beating faster. "A rose bush," she said to herself, "my very own rose bush." Now, the rose bush didn't really belong to Wanda. But since nobody seemed to own the lot or the heaps of junk that were piled there, she decided to care for this bush and make it her own. All during school, she thought about her rose bush and couldn't wait to go back. Finally, at 3:15, when school let out, she rushed to the rose bush. It was still bare and thorny. Maybe it needs some more sun, she thought. So she put down her school bag and began dragging some of the nearby trash out to the curb. Mrs. Turner, her neighbor, who was on her way to the store, stopped her to help her move a broken chair to the curb. "Cleaning up the neighborhood, Wanda?" Mrs. Turner asked. "Oh, I'm not just cleaning," Wanda told her. "I'm helping my rose bush to get more sun so it will bloom." "Your rose bush?" Mrs. Turner asked. "Where is your rose bush?" Wanda said, "Over there," pointing proudly to the bare and thorny bush. "Oh, Wanda, I'm not so sure that's a rose bush," Mrs. Turner said gently. "Sure it is," said Wanda. "I've seen rose bushes in books, and this is what they look like before they bloom. You just wait. In a few weeks, this lot will be full of roses." Says Mrs. Turner, shaking her head. "Good luck, Wanda." The next day after school, Wanda hurried to her rose bush, but it was still bare and thorny. Maybe it needs more air, thought Wanda. So she puts down her school bag and began taking more of the trash out to the curb. "Once I get all this trash out of here, nothing will block the air from getting to my rose bush," thought Wanda. Day after day, Wanda visited the vacant lot, and more neighbors stopped by to see what she was doing. Mr. Claudel, Mrs. Giamani, and even Mr. Sanchez, who owned the butcher shop next door, dropped by to talk and even help remove some of the old shoes, bottles, and broken toys surrounding the bush. The school librarian, Miss Jones, on her way home from school, wondered if now the rose bush needed some water, since it was now getting plenty of sun and air. "Water," said Wanda. "Of course, that will make it bloom." Wanda went across the street to Mr. Sanchez's butcher shop. Mr. Sanchez gave her a plastic bucket of water. "I hope that really is a rose bush, Wanda," he said, looking at her doubtfully. "You'll see," Wanda said. "In a few weeks, that whole lot will be full of roses." Every day, Wanda ran to her rose bush after school, but every day it was still bare and thorny. As time went by, all the neighbors, and even Miss Jones, the librarian, asked about her rose bush with some doubt in their voice. To each person, Wanda would answer the same thing. "Just you wait. Pretty soon this whole lot will be filled with roses." And then one day in June, Wanda had an idea. Looking at the bare, thorny bush, she said, "If my rose bush won't give me roses, I'll just have to give roses to my rose bush." And when she saw all the neighbors, she gave each of them an invitation that said, "Please come for tea and muffins in Wanda's rose garden, Saturday morning at 9 a.m. And the next morning at 9, everyone was surprised to see Wanda's rose bush covered with roses, paper roses, that Wanda had made herself and carefully tied to each of the thorny branches. But more surprising yet, everyone who came to the party had brought along a rose bush to plant near hers, and Mrs. Jones even brought some muffins. After they had eaten their muffins and drunk their tea, they all got busy planting rose bushes. And Mr. Sanchez brought water from his shop and watered them all thoroughly. When the work was finished, Mr. Claude said, "Wanda, this sure is going to be a beautiful rose garden. Who knew?" Wanda and the others smiled. With an idea, determination, and by working together, anything seemed possible. And later that summer, the whole lot was filled with the biggest, most beautiful, sweetest smelling roses that anyone had ever seen, just as Wanda had always said it would be. The end. Thank you for listening to my story.
This is our church, a church we support through our gifts of time, our gifts of talent, and our gifts of treasure. Thank you for supporting our life together. The offering will now be joyfully given and received.
Will somebody wear me to the fair? Will a lady pin me in her hair? Will a child find me by a stream? Kiss my petals, weave me through a dream. For all of these simple things and much more, the flower is born.
The first reading today comes from the writings of Julia Kasdorf. It's called What I Learned from My Mother. I learned from my mother how to love the living, to have plenty of vases on hand in case you have to rush to the hospital with peonies cut from the lawn, black ants still stuck to their heads. I learned to save jars large enough to hold fruit salad for a whole grieving household, to cube hand-canned pears and peaches, to slice through maroon grape skins and flick out the sexual seeds with a knife point. I learned to attend viewings, even if I didn't know the deceased, to press the moist hands of the living, to look in their eyes and offer sympathy, as though I understood loss even then. I learned that whatever we say means nothing. What anyone will remember is that we came. I learned to believe that I had the power to ease awful pains materially, like an angel. Like a doctor, I learned to create from another's suffering my own usefulness. And once you know how to do this, you can never refuse. To every house you enter, you must offer healing. A chocolate cake you baked yourself, the blessing of your voice, your chaste touch.
We come now to the time in our worship service that we set aside for meditation and prayer. We'll have a time of shared silence, hear joys and sorrows of our community, share a spoken prayer, and then join in singing our responsive hymn. I invite you to join me now in a time of silence. We join in sorrow this morning on behalf of the LGBTQ community here in Texas, and really on behalf of all of us. Sorrow because the Texas legislature has continued assault on this community, moving bills forward that ban drag and transgender health care for youth that are likely to become law in Texas. We share in sorrow with Karen for her friend Rose, who lost her son of a heart attack, who was only 50. We share in sorrow with her. We also share in joy with Anita, who gives thanks for everyone who helped with the craft sale. We're grateful for that. We also share in joy with Josiah, who does our AV, celebrating a year with the kind and generous Horizon community. We're grateful for you. The words of our spoken prayer this morning come from the writings of the Reverend Christine Dance. I invite you into the spirit of prayer and meditation. Take a moment and center yourselves. Put your feet on the floor if you'd like. Settle into place. Take a few breaths. Spirit of life and spirit of love, that which is held in the silent sanctuary of our hearts. Our lives are like flowers. Like the flowers in the flower communion story, we gather flowers for our crowns. We collect flowers for our crowns. We collect beautiful moments, beautiful joys, delightful experiences, laughter and smiles. May we celebrate this beauty. but most flowers fall off their branches and they will inevitably die. So it is with our lives. There are times that our flowers wilt and die. We create space for the sorrows of our lives, the challenges, disappointments, sadnesses, and struggles. We make space to mourn and cry, and we hope that the flowers will return again. And there are times that we wait for the flowers to return, the liminal space in between. May we have hope that they will return to their full beauty soon. For all the seasons of our lives, we rely on the strength of community, our faith, and the confidence that we are all part of the cycle of life and that love endures. May it be so. Amen. I invite us to join together in singing our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life. Our second reading comes from the writings of the Reverend Richard Gilbert. Speak, flowers, speak. Why do you say nothing? The flowers have the gift of language. In the meadow, they speak of freedom, creating patterns wild and free as no gardener could match. In the forest, they nestle, snug carpets under the roof of leaf and branch, making a rug of such softness. At the end tip of branches, they cling briefly before bursting into fruit sweet to taste. Flowers, can you not speak joy to our sadness and hope to our fear? Can you not say how it is with you that you color the darkest corner? The flowers have the gift of language. At the occasion of birth, they are buds before bursting. At the ceremony of love, they unite two lovers in beauty. At the occasion of death, they remind us how lovely is life. Oh, would that you had voice. Silent messengers of hope, would that you could tell us how you feel, arrayed in such beauty. The flowers have the gift of language. In the dark depths of a death camp, they speak the light of life. In the face of cruelty, they speak of courage. In the experience of ugliness, they bespeak the persistence of beauty. Speak, messengers, speak, that we would hear your message. For we need to hear what you would say. For flowers have the gift of language. They transport the human voice on winds of beauty. They lift the melody of song to our ears. They paint through the eye and hand of the artist. Their fragrance binds us to sweet-smelling earth. May the blessing of the flowers be upon you. May their beauty beckon to you each morning, and their loveliness lure you each day, and their tenderness caress you each night. May their delicate petals make you gentle, and their eyes make you aware. May their stems make you sturdy, and their reaching make you care. Here ends the reading.
For those of you who are unfamiliar with the idea of Ikebana, which comes from the Japanese culture, I am going to make a Ikebana arrangement here shortly to the music of To a Wild Rose, played by Carmen and Elliot Nadel. But let me give you a little introduction. This will be a time when you can be contemplative and grateful for all its beauty. You can be very serene. In doing so, you will be calming your body, your mind, and your spirit by connecting with nature. This lovely ancient Japanese art dates back to the 7th century. It stemmed from a Buddhist practice of placing flowers on altars. The word Ikebana in Japanese means the living flower, which is what was trying to be accomplished by the Zen masters, which I am not, but I do my best and I like the Ikebana style, so it gives me pleasure. Kado actually means the way of the flower. And this was actually important in samurai training, if you can believe that. They were not just warriors, samurais. They also participated in tea ceremonies, flower arranging, and haiku. Ikebana was done by men as well as women. Many schools have developed over the many centuries that have happened, and they all have different guidelines, very strict, some of them. And even now in traditional homes, there's a special alcove that they keep called the tokonama, where they put the Ikebana arrangement. Ikebana has been described as subtle, sensitive, and sophisticated, and as you will see, also rather minimalistic. The idea is that you do this slowly, you look at it slowly, because fuss, haste, and impatience only brings discord into our lives and our surroundings and to those around us. So this is the calm time. An Ikebana artist usually works slowly and silently to become one with the heart of the flower, the universal heart. It helps them become more tolerant, more patient, and one might say more blessed internally and externally. Seasonal flowers are used as well as with other natural objects. And again, the purpose is to reflect on the impermanence of beauty and of life. The style that I like is the Moribunda style, and it works off the principle of 3. And you will see when I create it, there will be 3 stems. The one that goes highest is up to heaven. The one that goes lowest is down to earth, and the one in the middle is humankind. So.
Have you ever felt ashamed of the people who raised you? Be honest. Can raise hands. How many of us have been embarrassed by a mother or a father or that special someone who brought us up? Maybe it was their stodgy clothes or the awful music their radio station played, or maybe the way they talked, their accent, their faulty grammar. I remember my mother sharing a story of her father, and these are her words. As a young girl, I used to cringe when my Brooklyn-born father said something like, "I seen that red car today." I probably responded, "Daddy, you saw a car today, and it was red." It was not red, it was burgundy. She says, I must have been so annoying. For the next question, you might have to be a little older, maybe 25. Have you ever had the privilege of embarrassing a younger special someone in your life? Just by being yourself. That first time or two you embarrass someone younger is kind of a rite of passage, a time when you know you are starting to grow up. My parents used to tell us that embarrassing us was in their job description as parents. On this Mother's Day, the poet Carl Dennis invites us to look back in time, maybe even back before we were born. He invites us to see our parents, our ancestors, as people, real people who made choices, who loved and gave, lived and died. Don't be ashamed of your people, he says. At the same time, the poet asks us to look at our own lives, to look at the people with whom we share our lives, and to look at the choices we might make here and now, this day, this week. The poet calls us to the spiritual discipline of paying attention. Mother's Day can be complicated. I know ministers who approach the Mother's Day sermon with fear and dread. What to say that might speak to the vast range of feelings people carry about mothers and mothering, about families and relationships. We carry here today all kinds of experiences and memories. Hallmark can make it sound all sweet and easy. But mothering, as some of you well know, is not all sweet and easy, nor are any of our closest relationships in this life. So it is with humility that I speak today. I know that whatever words I offer may fall short. My words may not speak to your situation, your experiences, your feelings. My message today, though, is for all of us, whether or not we are mothers, and whatever the state of our past or current relationships with our parents, our partners, our young, or our friends. On this Mother's Day, I invite us to pay attention, to look at our lives and our relationships, and to remember that our time together here on this earth is both precious and limited. A lot can distract us on this day and keep us from paying attention to the things that really matter. Mother's Day in America has become something of a marketing phenomenon with plenty of pressure to spend. That first Mother's Day, though, was not about gifts and cards and flowers. The first Mother's Day was instead a day to promote peace in our worlds. It was one of our Unitarian ancestors, Julia Ward Howe, best known for writing the Battle Hymn of the Republic, who first advocated for a special day to honor mothers as a way to call for an end to the war and violence that might end the life, anywhere, anytime, of any mother's child. Julia Ward Howe had seen the bloodshed of the Civil War. She believed that war was wrong and that no mother's child should die in battle. In 1870, Howe wrote in the first Mother's Day proclamation, "Our sons, in these days we would say our children, shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience." In her proclamation, she called for an international congress to promote the amicable settlements of disputes and peace among all the peoples of the world. All these years later, I have yet to find a Mother's Day card containing either Julia Ward Howe's words or a call for peace. The story of the first Mother's Day is not quaint historical trivia. The way I see it, we honor our mothers and all who nurture life when we take time to pay attention to something as basic as how we get along with our siblings. We are all family, part of a larger family than family sometimes seems, the poet Miller Williams reminds us. We know this truth, but we forget. The world tells us we are all separate, but this is a falsehood, a mere illusion. Sometimes it takes the truth-telling voices of the poets to grab our attention, to wake us up and call us back to what we once knew, somewhere deep in our souls. And that is one reason why poets' voices are so often heard in Unitarian Universalist worship. For generations, humankind has known that the deepest spiritual truths can be conveyed only in poem and song. The Hebrew and Christian Bibles, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, all speak truths through poetry. As Unitarian Universalists, we don't draw from a single sacred book, and we don't all agree on a single official name for the holy. We draw wisdom for many words of the religions of the world. Sometimes our contemporary ears also need to hear the ancient teachings in language that is not otherworldly, but in words that are a part of this world. We need sacred words that are human and new, fresh and clear. So it is a long-standing tradition in Unitarian Universalism to honor the human voice by turning to poetry as a source of spiritual wisdom. Poetry, writes Catherine Mosby, is a form of prayer broad enough to include people who can't name their God. The poetry of Miller Williams dispels the falsehoods of humankind's separateness and leads us to sacred truth when he calls us to see, far down where the surface disappears, that all who carry their mothers' and fathers' dreams, all whose dreams are born by their daughters and sons and children, were kin from the first words spoken and still are. I want to believe, he says, that everyone knew this once. We came from the same soil. It circles a star. It is true. We are siblings who came from the same soil, and so for the sake of all of us, we best try to get along. Together, we circle a star, and we're all on this ride together. We are all in this adventure we call life together. Sometimes, though, we have a hard time just getting along, even with those who are closest to us, our partners, our parents, our children, our friends. We pick at each other. We find faults. We see only the shortcomings in another. We quibble over someone else's foibles and faults while remaining unaware of our own shortcomings that bring hurt to our sister. We point to the speck in our brother's eye, Jesus taught us, but ignore the log in our own. Sometimes we might wish things were different. We wish we lived in a different place, maybe even with different people. There's a funny story about a young Minnesota boy who fantasized that he had different parents, sophisticated people from Manhattan who talked about philosophy and went to plays and drank champagne. The boy yearned to have almost anyone for parents other than his own church-going, sensible shoe-wearing, tuna hot dish eating, very embarrassing parents. And the problem is that fantasy family is not real, and only real people can give love. Thinking back to my mother's story of my grandfather's, she says, though his Brooklynese used to grate on her nerves, she always knew without a doubt that he was real. He was neither pretentious nor phony, but down to earth, no nonsense kind of guy, authentic through and through. And over time, as I reflect on his story and the way it intersects with my mother's, I grew to appreciate how hard it must have been for him to start a school speaking only Danish, and how much determination it must have taken to do all he did in his life with only a grammar school education. My mother shares, over time I grew to cherish the poetry and music in his speech, and his grammar got better. In the same way, I used to be embarrassed by my own parents' Southern accents when we lived in New England, knowing that we stood out. I used to be embarrassed when people asked questions about my mother's role in ministry. And now I can understand that these differences were real. They were strengths, unique things that made my parents who they were. It's true. Our children are always watching. I hope by now your thoughts have drifted to memories of someone close to you, someone who you have grown to understand more fully over time. Even if they are no longer living among us, take this time, right now, to send them your love. See their faces, speak their names in the silence of your heart. I've learned that our relationships continue long after people are gone from this world. Even if we've moved beyond being ashamed of our own parents or our people, there may be times in our lives when we do wish things were different. Maybe we imagine that different people around us would make things somehow better. Maybe we imagine that there's someplace else we belong, as Carl Dennis puts it, a setting more promising. Maybe we think, either literally or metaphorically, of moving on, as the poet puts it. Maybe trying a town with a climate friendlier to our many talents. We imagine that someday things will be just right, and then we'll be able to get on with our lives. Stop, the poet says. Stop wasting time. Quit fantasizing about elsewhere and later and someday, and start living here, now. Don't be ashamed, the poet tells us, of the homely thought that whatever you might do elsewhere, you might do here in the time remaining, if you can resolve, at last, to pay attention. Pay attention to the people right around you, the people who share your dinner table, the people with whom you work, the people who live on your street, the people in your life right now. Woven throughout the teachings of the world's spiritual traditions is the truth that time is precious, a gift to be honored and savored and used. A few years back, some pastors wrote a book about living what they called the no regrets life, and challenged their readers to imagine that we had only 1 month left to live. What would matter most? What would we do with our time? I've found that when people know their time on earth is short, they are concerned neither with possessions nor with the trivial. What they care most about is relationships, their connections with other people. They want to right any wrongs, to forgive and be forgiven, leave no I love yous unsaid. And so often there is a deep understanding in the heart of someone who is dying that our lives are not just about us and our needs and our wants. I have seen in the face of one who knows their time is short a deep desire to give, to leave behind something that might serve the wider human family. What if we lived so that if we were told we only had a month to live, we wouldn't need to make any huge changes? We would be living a no regrets life. What matters most in this life is people. And on this Mother's Day, I challenge you to pay attention to your life and to the people around you. Use your time here to bring more love to our earth. Don't put it off. Time is precious. Pay attention. May it be so. Amen. So some of you may be visiting us for the first time today, or maybe didn't know about today's flower communion, which you can see before us, and that's okay. Though some have come without a flower today, others have brought extra, and there's enough to go around. Everyone is welcome, and everyone can partake in this special ritual. Through some miracle similar to the story of the loaves and fishes, there are always flowers left over at the end of flower communion. This is a grace of our church community. So I want to tell you a little bit about the story of what started this ritual that we hold dear. The story of flower communion begins in Prague in June 1923 with a Unitarian minister named Norbert Čapek. The city of Prague was in turmoil as it tried to recover from World War I. And Czechs, who had traditionally been staunch supporters of religious freedom, had spent many years under German rule where they had been forced to practice Catholicism. The people of Prague, embracing their new freedom, were trying to rebuild their community. But they were faced with widespread hunger, and they were lacking basic necessities such as warm clothes. Reverend Norbert Čapek was the minister of a new and growing Unitarian church in town, and he was known for his uplifting hymns and his welcoming community. Čapek knew that during these hard times, people needed something even more special. He wanted a religious ritual that would bind his diverse community of people together in hope and care. He knew that the traditional communion service of the Catholic Church maybe would not be comforting to his parishioners, some of whom had felt let down by what they saw as corruption in the leadership there. But what kind of ritual would be able to heal the wounds of his people? Reverend Čapek looked to the beauty of nature for a solution. For his special ritual, he asked everyone to bring a flower to the church, and it could be from a cultivated garden or a wildflower from the side of the road. Even a twig or a leaf would have been just fine. And as people entered the church, their flowers were collected in a large vase. They arranged them into a special bouquet. And the flowers were blessed with prayers and hymns written by Čapek. At the end of the service, everyone was invited to take a different flower than they brought, taking the flowers just as they were, without regard for where they came from or who brought them. This was the first flower communion. Čapek wanted the flowers to symbolize the people in his community, reminding us that many different flowers can make a beautiful bouquet, that all people have value and importance. But the story also has a sad part. Hitler's troops began to occupy Prague in 1939, and Reverend Čapek and his church were not popular with the Nazis. Nazi records state that Čapek was deemed too dangerous to the Reich to be allowed to live. And in 1942, Čapek was taken to the Dachau concentration camp, where he died in the gas chambers. Čapek was a minister up until the end, spreading kindness in the camp and writing letters of encouragement to Unitarians in Prague. His flower communion service was brought to the United States by his wife Maya. And while he may have died, his beliefs about the worth and beauty in every person can never die. And they are what we celebrate today.
In order to do the ritual, I'm going to call on our ushers and myself and anybody else who wants to join in. Just as we do the offering, we're about to offer you each a gift from somebody else in the community that brought a flower today. And we're going to pass the flowers around, and you all take one flower, not one you brought, so one from somebody else, and then we will have our closing song in just a moment. But meanwhile, Carmen will give us some music to select a flower by.
I invite you to hold your flowers up. We bless these flowers, symbol of our lives, symbol of the beauty in each person, symbol of resistance. May it be so. I invite you to rise, either in body or in spirit, and join in singing our closing hymn. Come sing a song with me.
Bring you home.
And now, as we close, we say our mission and vision. We extinguish this flame, but not our commitment to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. We do this because we envision a beloved community filled with compassion, helping all to thrive in a just world.
I invite you to join hands as you're comfortable. Yeah. Friends, my prayer for you is that you hold fast to the beauty in the flowers and remember that no time is now. Go in peace.